Hi and welcome. I'm trying to learn history today with Treaty of Amiens, and after we've done with it, we're gonna do morning stretching. And if you participate in the morning stretching, then it's at your own risk, and we're talking about war. In November 1801, Cornwallis, Cornwallis was sent to France with plenipotentiary powers to negotiate a final agreement. The expectation among the British populace that peace was at hand put enormous pressure on Cornwallis, something that Bonaparte realized and capitalized on. The French negotiators, Napoleon's brother Joseph, as well as Talleyrand, constantly shifted their positions, leaving Cornwallis to write, "I feel it as the most unpleasant circumstance attending this unpleasant business that, after I have obtained his acquaintance on any point, I can have no confidence that it is finally settled, and that he will not recede from it in our next conversation." The Batavian Republic, whose economy depended on trade but had been ruined by the war, appointed Rutger Jan Schimmelpenninck its ambassador to France, to represent it in the peace negotiations. He arrived in Amiens on the 9th December. The Dutch role in the negotiations was marked by a lack of respect on the part of the French, who thought of him as a vanquished and conquered client whose present government owned them everything. Schimmelpenninck and Cornwallis negotiated agreements on the status of Ceylon, which was to remain British, the Cape Colony, which was to be returned to the Dutch, but to be open to all, and the indemnification of the deposed House of Orange-Nassau for its losses. However, Joseph did not immediately agree to their terms, presumably needing to consult with the first consul on the matter. In January 1802, Napoleon traveled to Lyon to accept the presidency of the Italian Republic, a nominally independent client republic that covered northern Italy and had been established in 1797. Okay, now we're coming to the new part. And in 1797, in northern Italy there was the Italian Republic established. And Napoleon was coming in January 1802 to accept the presidency of that Italian Republic. And that act violated the Treaty of Luneville, in which Bonaparte agreed to guarantee the independence of the Italian and other client republics. Okay, whatever, there was previously a Treaty of Luneville, and that Bonaparte said that he will guarantee the independence of Italian and the client republics like the Italian Republic in northern Italy, but somehow the Sterling there violated it. He also continued to support French General Pierre Auguerre's reactionary coup d'état of 18 September 1801 in the Batavian Republic and its new constitution that was ratified by a sham election and brought the Republic into close alignment with its dominant partner. Okay, the Batavian. Here was written about when the Batavian Republic's economy depended on trade and it was ruined through the war, the previous 10 years of war, more or less. And now the French general Pierre Auguerre made the coup d'état in the Batavian Republic and a new constitution of a Batavian Republic which bounded closer to France and which was ratified through a sham election, so not an actual one, just a sham election. British newspaper readers followed the events, presented in strong moralizing colours. Hawkesbury wrote of Bonaparte's action at Lyon that it was a gross breach of faith, exhibiting an inclination to insult Europe. Writing from London, he informed Cornwallis that it created the greatest alarm in this country and there are many persons who were pacifically disposed and who since this event are desirous of renewing the war. Okay, the people in Britain were following the events in the newspapers, and Hawkesbury, the main negotiator of Britain, wrote about Bonaparte going to Lyon, where he accepted the presidency of the Northern Italian Republic, which violated the Treaty of Luneville. That creates the greatest alarm in this country, and there are many persons who were pacifically disposed to since this event desirous of renewing the war. Okay, whatever. We were very disagreeing with this breaking of the Treaty of Luneville because Bonaparte was traveling to Lyon to accept the Italian Republic. and many people were desirous of renewing the war, did now Hawkesbury write. The Spanish negotiator Marquis José Nicolás de Azara did not arrive in Amiens until early February 1802. Now this preliminary agreement was signed on the 30th September 1801, probably. So, September 1801. Okay, that's not that long. But it's still 5 months. Now the Spanish Marquis José Nicolás de Azara did then arrive in February 1802 in Amiens. And after some preliminary negotiations, he proposed to Cornwallis. Now, who's one Cornwallis? The Marquess Cornwallis. British. Okay, Cornwallis is British. It's not Cornwallis. Cornwallis is British. After some preliminary negotiations, he proposed to the Spanish, de Azara to Cornwallis the British, that Britain and Spain make a separate agreement. But the British Cornwallis rejected that in the belief that would jeopardize the more important negotiations with France. Okay, Spain and Britain were maybe also at war. And they wanted to do a separate agreement, but Britain rejected it because they thought the agreement to come to an agreement with France would be more important. Pressure continued to mount on the British negotiators for a peace deal, in part because budget discussions were underway in Parliament, and the prospect of continued war was another significant factor. Okay, the British Republic was strongly expecting that peace was at hand and putting enormous pressure on Cornwallis to accept basically anything, and also the Parliament was discussing the new budget plan of the next year, and people were hoping that all over that the grain price would go down and the revival of markets would happening, and the imposed income tax would be withdrawn, and that all was a factor on Cornwallis to come to an agreement. The principal sticking point in the late negotiations was the status of Malta. Bonaparte, that is an island in the Mediterranean Sea, Bonaparte eventually proposed that the British were to withdraw within 3 months of signing, with control passed back to a recreated Order of St. John, whose sovereignty was to be guaranteed by all of the major European powers. Left unspecified in the proposal was the means by which the order would be re-established. It had essentially dissolved upon French seizure of the island in 1798. Furthermore, none of the other powers had been consulted on the matter. On the 14th March, London, under pressure to finalize the budget, gave Cornwallis a hard deadline. He was to return to London if he could not reach an agreement within 8 days. Following a 5-hour negotiation season that ended at 3 a.m. on the 25th March, Cornwallis and Joseph, the brother of Napoleon French, signed the final agreement. Cornwallis was unhappy with the agreement, but he was also worried about the ruinous consequences of renewing a bloody and hopeless war. Okay, that is now the final negotiations part of this, and it's actually just 3 pages, I thought it was before. And we have just 2 more things, the terms, now what is written inside of that peace deal, and then we're having. And there is a page missing. Now there is a page missing. These are 4 pages. Then we're having a me interlude, and there is then more to the war, which happens then because it lasted just for 1 year, this peace deal. Now they're writing a lot about that. I don't know what I wanted to say, it doesn't really make sense because there is a 4th page. So the main things which we have here is that Britain and the key negotiator Cornwallis were massively pressured by the public and by the Parliament now to come to an agreement and to accept basically anything. And he wrote then, worried, the ruinous consequences of renewing a bloody and hopeless war were at hand. Now, this was the history part. If you were here for history, then you can go directly to the next part of history. The best way probably to the Treaty of Amiens. We might continue on history to something else on the Treaty of Amiens, but we will continue at some point with the Treaty of Amiens. Now to the next part of history, or the next part of history, Treaty of Amiens, we will do now the morning stretching. If you participate in the morning stretching, then it's going to be What is your sense? And we go forward, shoulder circles, become back, up, and front, and down. And last time. And now backward. Front, up, back, down. Last time. And now breathe in, let the shoulders up. Out, let the fall down. Again, in the shoulders up. Out, let the fall down. Again, in the shoulders up. Out, let the shoulders down. Again, in the shoulders up. Out, the shoulders down. Now we have a plucker. Breathe in, let the arms up. And reach all the way with one hand high. Pretend to take an apple hanging high on an apple branch, turn it a bit around, and then pluck it. Last two. And now shift up. Arms up to a T, legs wide apart, breathe in. And out, go over to one side. Again, in with the out over to the first side, to the other side, and in. Out to the other side, again in, and out to the side, again in, and out, we're leaning onto our knees, the buffalo fighting its hangover. Breathe in, and out, bring one shoulder in front, in, shoulder back, and out the other shoulder in front. Shoulder back, up the shoulder in front, shoulder back, and up shoulder in front. Okay. And out is hanging down. Breathe again in. And out over to one leg. Breathe again. And out over to the second leg. Breathe again. Out into the middle. And breathe in. And out coming slowly from back up, making the top of the quads. Shoulder up. Now the toes pointing to the outside, we're having an ulnar length space between the heels. We're breathing in and doing the garden pause, lifting the arms up. And breathe out and sink down and place your elbows against the inside of the knees. Now we're going to straighten up the back. And breathe out and come with the back up. Breathe again in. And out again down. Breathe again in. And out and up again. Breathe again in. And out, down. Breathe again in, straight up the back. Out and come slowly in one straight line upwards. And the hands down. And let's end with the strong equilateral legs wide apart. Breathe in. Out. Again in. Out. And another round. Breathe in. Out. In. Out. Now we're going to close the legs. And breathe out. That was component stretching. I thank you very much, and until next time.